welcome to Books and Brews Light, number 23. We have with us today Rhonda Linn, a poet, and more than a poet, but can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. So I'm a writer and also an entrepreneur. I run a digital marketing agency for holistic wellness and spiritual businesses.
Fantastic. And what's your book about? It's your first book, right?
It is, and it's a lifelong dream of mine. It's a book of poems, and it's in 3 parts. It's really a book about grief and loss and renewal and how we find pathways into that, even when we're sort of drowning in darkness at the time.
And what inspired you to write this particular book?
So I had a significant relationship in my life, and there was a lot of fallout over that for over many, many years. And so this book was written years and years later, just as a way of sort of making sense of that experience. And I think it's really a testament to our complexity, that we live in a culture that just asks us to be shining and youthful and so happy all the time, but we rarely are. And so I see this book as a testament to all of the complex parts of ourselves as we navigate our human experience.
Okay. And why did you choose poetry to try and tell this story and talk about these issues?
I would say that I've always been a poet. I love the sound of language. I love line breaks. And so poetry has just been something that's always woven into my life in a really beautiful way. And I also have a Substack publication called Earth and Jar Stars, and I do a lot of long form writing on there. And one of my earliest subscribers had reached out to me and said, I think that you're actually a poet writing creative nonfiction. And it made me laugh because that was very true. I think that poetry gives us a lens of being able to see these really small moments in our lives, or just being able to zoom in on things in a really beautiful way. And so That's why this is really, my book is called The Chapel of Small Breath. And it's really these small moments and just zooming in on them. And so I thought it was a beautiful medium.
And do you happen to have your book handy to hold up the cover?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how well.
It's a beautiful cover. I find that it's very simple, and that allows you to really focus in on just the color and the texture and the little bit of an image and the words. So I think that's a really well done cover. And before we dig into it too deeply, I took your suggestion. I can't tip this too much or I'll dump it on the computer. But what I have here is basil tea. And so I happen to have an herb garden growing in my sunroom. So I dumped in fresh basil. And this is kind of spicy basil. I have no idea if this tastes like what it's supposed to, but it's a nice hot drink on what's a very cold day here. And I've been working outside. So do you have something to drink while we chat?
Absolutely. I have Tulsi basil tea as well. And I just love it. I think for me, it's like a grounding drink, but then it's also a little bit energizing. So I think it's a good one, especially for a cold weekend.
Right. Now, where are you living in the country?
I'm in Michigan, in the middle part of the state.
Okay, so you've probably got it much colder than I do.
Where are you located at?
I'm in Tennessee right now. And so we recently moved from northern Duluth, well, about a year and a half ago. And so it's much warmer here than it was there, but it was a chilly day and it was kind of a sharp breeze, and we live on a farm. So I was outside helping our helper with various things. And so I got kind of windblown and red in the face. But I was curious, when you talk about being involved in wellness and holistic wellness, are you working with herbs and medicinal plants and things?
Well, I definitely do that myself. I also live on kind of a farmstead and have been planting a perennial food forest, which has been really lovely, and just love like leaning into plants as, a method for healing. And also just, I think I can see my whole life through the lens of nature in a much more gentle way. And so it's invited me to do that. And then in terms of my client work, I have lots of clients who are like holistic wellness practitioners and other sorts of spiritual business owners. And so they definitely use, supplements and herbs in their work. So
Right.
sort of,
right. Does basil, what kind of qualities does it have as far as healing or health benefits?
I don't know that I'm the best one to speak about that. I know like it has like rich antioxidant properties and is an antiviral as well. I love the taste of it, and particularly in a tea, it's a little, I don't know what you think of it if you're drinking it for the first time, but.
Well, there's an interesting thing about this basil. I don't know what's going on, but I swear I plant one thing and something else grows. And so the pot that this basil is growing in, I swear I planted marjoram. I swear I did. And I tasted it, and I tasted the basil because my Google on my camera says it's basil. I'm thinking, but I know I planted marjoram, so I tasted the basil that's supposed to be basil, and I tasted this, and it's got like a little bit of a kick. It's a little bit spicier than my other basil, but I was told that's, there are different types. And so I like the taste of it. I can't taste it quite so much in the tea, but it is a neat flavor. Yeah. So do you have a reading ready for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you're going to do a couple of poems.
Yes, if there's time, that would be wonderful. So, and I'll just preface this to say that this book is written in 3 parts. So the first part is really about the relationship, and the second part is the relationship dissolves, and then the third part is about renewal, but maybe renewal that doesn't look like a Hallmark card or like Instagram perfect. And
right.
So these are books, or these are from, this one's from the second section. It's called Widower. Days fall over with the sound of metal planks like guitar strings, or the sound of a single spoon on the bottom of a cereal bowl every morning for the last 20 years. My hands always outstretched toward her body, memory fat as snowflakes, the kind that don't fall, but just stay, caught by the crosswind, suspended on.
And your second poem?
So this is a poem called So, and I spent some time in Houston, Texas when I was much younger, and I saw a man that was carrying a whole bunch of flowers. They were almost covering his face, and that's where this poem picks up. Carsick in the bobbing of a city bus in Houston, where I see a man crossing the street with armfuls of summer flowers. He is you crossing the street of memory. I never told you, though the words squirmed in my mouth like tiny darting fish I couldn't catch, like threads of gold shimmering under the surface. But in the humid heat of Houston, my hair is growing in gray and my tears don't evaporate. So I'd like to say I saw you, face full of petals, as I tasted the salt of everything we didn't sow.
That's beautiful. And so is S-E-W? No, S-O-W.
S-O-W.
When you gave the title, I thought it was S-O. So that's why sometimes, right, reading can give a different impact than listening sometimes. I heard that word wrong. So your book is freshly out as of what, a few weeks ago?
Yeah, it was published in October.
Okay. And what was the publishing process like for you?
I mean, it was wonderful. So from my Substack publication, a woman had reached out to me who's a very famous, nationally known poet. And she, kind of asked me to send her some poems, and I sent her some of these. This was last November or so. And, she just encouraged me to finish the collection out and really gave me some wonderful publication advice. And so the process all really happened very quickly. I worked with Bell Publishing House in publishing it. And so really, started to work on it. My friend Lynn, to whom the book is dedicated, died in November. And as she was dying, she published a book of poems. And it really gave me a kick in the pants not to wait that long, because I had been called for a lifetime to write. And so as she published this book as she was dying, and then she died, that's when I started my Substack community, Earth and Jar Stars, and I got to work on this book, and then it came into the world really quickly thereafter.
Right. It sounds like everything just really fell in place for you as far as the right people coming into your life at the right time, and it was all just there. Do you have some background in like a degree in English, or have you taken classes on poetry, or self-taught, or how did you go about this?
Yeah, so I have loved to write for my entire lifetime. And my degrees, both of them are in English. And so, I love literature, have been in many different writing groups in many forms over the years as well. And I worked in education. I was an English teacher, and then I worked in higher education administration for years and years. And then when the pandemic hit, everything got really intense at my job, and I had some things with a family member that got really sick as well. And I just knew that I needed another path forward. And so at that point, I started an online business, which very quickly turned into a writing business, because I started out as a general assistant, but then I quickly, just found that my gifts, my training was in writing. And so I specialized in writing specifically. And so I was doing that for clients, but then really feeling called to write more of my own work. And I think I was honestly just scared to do it until when my friend died. Then it was just like, okay, you're called to do this, and just go.
Yeah, I think I followed maybe not quite the same path, but there were some events in my life where I said, I've been wanting to write forever. It's time to do it. And it really helped get me away from some of the ugliness that was going on at the time, and gave my life a lot of new meaning. And I think that's kind of part of what you help people with, because you also, is it part of your Substack? I know somewhere I saw on your webpage, True Calling, you help people find their true calling.
Yeah, I just believe, like, in my heart of hearts that, we have guidance from the divine, and we have guidance within us that can help us find our true path. And our culture just doesn't really support us in that. And so for sure, with my Substack community, I'm always kind of writing about how do we follow these little breadcrumbs or these little nudges of what brings us joy and curiosity in finding our path. And then I bring that same support to my clients as well, just in terms of how do you really build a business that actually supports you and lets you live out your heart's calling in a profound way.
Yeah. What do you say to people who are, 35, 40, and they're still like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up? What is your advice to them?
I mean, I would say that maybe I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
But here you are.
But that if we open ourselves to leaning into what we feel curious and joyful about, and really, even if those things make no money and no sense, if we just follow them in little ways, that really the path shows up for us in a way that our logical mind just can't map out. And so it's just by like leaning into wonder and leaning into that process, I think that we, sort of unfold new pathways for ourselves.
Right. Do you have a third poem ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So this is the last poem in the collection, and it's where the title, The Chapel of Small Breath, comes from. You spend days watching the Chapel of Small Breath, this space, your life, always pulled across the wire in a half gasp of longing, and still the sad, swollen fiber beating through dark. Think of a mast standing strong and broken to bird bones simultaneously. The muscle somehow choking through salt, yet tempered to sing.
That's beautiful too. And I really like that phrase, the chapel of small breath. Did that just pop into your head?
Yeah, a lot of times if I'm just walking outside or doing things in the garden, and these images come to me, and yeah, I thought it was a beautiful image, and something that, when we're going through really dark times, sometimes our breathing becomes really shallow. And so I loved calling this book, that's really, in some ways, it's a hopeful book in that it's about renewal, but it's a dark book as well. And just how the breath, can kind of carry us through these dark times in our lives. People have told me that the book is, that they've said that it's a work of art, and that also that it invites readers into this sacred liminal space of loss. And so I just like that title, The Chapel of Smoke Breath.
Right. I think it's very evocative. And I do have to ask, since you put out a book of poetry, who is your favorite poet, or do you have many?
I have so many. It's really hard to say. I say W.S. Merwin is one of them that I come back to again and again. Like, I love Naomi Shea of Nye, Ellen Bass, so many. I read poems all the time.
Are these more modern, current poets?
Yeah, I would say so. Modern American poets.
Okay, I'll have to look into some of them. I probably just need to sit down and read more poetry. I haven't done it in a while. So what has the feedback been? Are people coming to you and kind of saying, I feel better, I have new direction, I feel like I can relate, or like someone can relate to what I'm going through? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Yeah, I mean, it's been extraordinary because so many people, and people I don't even know, have reached out to me just to say that they felt less alone in the world after reading this book, or, that they could really see their own journey of loss in a new way as well, and to share their stories. And it's just been a really beautiful process of, connecting with new folks and seeing the book ripple out into the world.
Right.
It's really stretched me, right? I'm an introvert. I'm kind of a shy person. And so doing this was not an easy thing, but I'm just so glad that I did because of these new connections, and just, having the confidence now to publish another book as well.
What is the book is about overcoming pain. What is some of your best advice for people who are in pain? And I think primarily emotional pain is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Although I think like it can go to different spectrums as well. I mean, I think that our culture really wants us to, just be happy all of the time. And the reality is that we're not. And so I would say, to like lean into that darkness and to lean into those dark times in the ways that you can, without trying to like diagnose it and fix it and make it better. And really through the lens of like, what's the most nurturing thing that I could do for myself right now? What's the most supportive thing to throw shit out the window and to just lean into what is it that I really need? Mm-hmm. I think is like a beautiful starting point. Obviously, to lean into community and support in the ways that you need to as well, but really to not try to jolt yourself out of that right away, because I have found in my own life that periods of darkness, they're icky and it's not fun, but they have been like pivotal moments of transformation in my own life. And I think that we miss that if we're trying to, just skip right through them. Right.
I did have, this is almost funny looking back. I was going through this very dark situation, somebody doing difficult things, and I had a counselor say to me, can you just pretend everything's okay? I thought, no, no, I can't, because it's not okay. And, it really was a situation where action had to be taken. But I'm kind of relating to that, to you saying people want to just pretend. And you can't. You're right. You can't. So you have another book. Have you started on it already?
I have. It's about rest as a tool for personal transformation. Mm-hmm. But then it really ends with rest as a tool for societal transformation, in that when we can really nourish ourselves and when we can stop pushing so hard and stop hustling, new pathways open. And through that, we can sort of shape our culture in new ways that we can't if we're just on this hamster wheel constantly.
So when you say society, you're kind of talking about trying to change culture to something a little more relaxed, like all of society.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just believe in my heart that a better world is possible, and that starts by taking care of ourselves, and really by getting, centered in who we are and following what we're called to do. And
Right.
as we do that, then that ripples out in ways that impact other people and that ultimately change the world. I mean, it sounds dramatic to say that,
Right.
but I believe it.
But there's a lot of truth to that if one person says this is good and starts putting that message out there, I mean, how else are you going to start? But by changing yourself and then telling other people this is what works. And so is this next book poetry or is it more prose?
It's creative nonfiction. And it's
Okay.
going to be a relatively small book because it's a book about rest. So it's little vignettes. And a lot
Okay.
of them, this current book, The Chapel of Small Breath, and this next book, I'm just a nature person. And so they're very rooted in the elements in the natural world. And this next book is all these little vignettes about nature and how we can look at nature and then see a reflection of ourselves through a more gentle lens through that.
Uh-huh.
So that sounds kind of obtuse, but there's a chapter in there that talks about how when you grow berry bushes, they will grow really easily for a few years in a certain location, but then they need to move and you have to let a new patch grow. And if you try to keep the same patch of berries growing for a long time, at a certain point, they'll decline no matter how hard you work at it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so, for somebody like me, like I'm a multi-passionate person. And
Right.
so I tend to beat myself up and be like, oh, I'm like following this interest and this other one is the other one. But then when I look at nature and something like berry bushes, that those things thrive by moving, that gives a really beautiful lens, for our own lives and how we like to grow and work and how we can do that a little bit more effortlessly.
That's a really neat analogy. And I have found that I think every author I've ever interviewed has had lots of interests. And which probably is part of why we can write, because you have to kind of know a lot about a lot of things and have some life experience, I think, to really be a good writer. So yes, I have many interests. We moved here about 18 months ago, and I had taken a stained glass making class. And in fact, let me grab this. I took a stained glass making class before we left Duluth. Yeah, and we could only pick from a few designs because it had to be simple enough for a beginner. But we went out and we bought all the equipment, and then we moved, and our house here is smaller and the basement was unfinished. So my husband completely finished one of the rooms down there. We've got the table in. I've got all the equipment moved in there, but I still haven't unpacked it and put it out on the table. And every time I see that, I think I want to make stained glass, but it's been a year and a half. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
So
maybe this winter, if it's nice and cool, I think I love the process of stained glass or even quilting, like the idea of like taking these shards and putting them together into something beautiful. I think it's not unlike writing or really any kind of creative activity.
Right. I am curious about your book. When you say vignettes, are they like a half a page, a couple of pages? How long are they?
Yeah, some of them, are just even a few lines. There's a lot of white space in the book because, again, it's just a book about rest. So it's not a tome,
right.
But some of them are a couple pages long as well. But they're all just little chapters about like these little either reflections from nature or, kind of people that I encountered that gave me a really interesting view about rest. And so it's not like a productivity plan or, some kind of action strategy. It's really, so the book opens and it talks about the fact that when the ground is hard pan and it rains, the rain literally can't go down into the soil because it just sheets right off, right? And that's not unlike our hearts and minds, really, when we get really overtaxed, that we can go get massages and we can sleep 8 hours at night, but that rest some kind of sheets off. And so the invitation that I have in the beginning of the book is that when you start to play in the soil of the heart, if you will, a little bit through these little vignettes and through just different perspectives about it, that rest can kind of seep into us in new ways. Just like when you start to play in a hard compacted soil, the rain can soak down to it in ways that it wasn't possible before. And so that's kind of my invitation to start the book, is just these different perspectives about how to see rest.
That's wonderful. And I think that's so important. And I think you're so right. We're a very driven society. And I'm probably on the more guilty side of that. I've often said when you're raised by a military officer, you feel like you have to charge through life. You're not allowed to sit and rest. And so that's something that I've kind of had to work at. It's okay to take a breather now and again and relax. And I think you're right. It makes your mind and your imagination more fertile, just like the soil. So I think that's an important book. And so you're writing this book, and where can people find you online?
So I'm on like Facebook and Instagram, and my website is Rhonda, and my last name is linn.com. I have a Substack publication that's called Earthen Jar, Stars, which is about being cradled by through the mucky times of our life and through the shining times of our life through the lens of nature as well. Love to connect with folks.
Fantastic. And I will have that on the screen. People can find me at booksandbrews.net. We have a YouTube channel, which anybody watching this is already on. I'm at lauravosica.com. Our sponsor is gabrielshornpress.com. We have lots of great authors there. And you can find all my adorable farm animals, speaking of resting and finding joy in life, at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com. I'm still trying to catch a video. We had these little lambs born at the end of October. There are 4 of them, and they're the cutest things ever. They kind of are like cream colored and brown. They look like cinnamon bread. So I get hungry every time I see them, which is probably why they run from me. But it's hilarious. They'll be running along and they'll just go bing, literally straight up in the air. And I had no idea she could do that. So I'm trying to capture it on video, but they never do it when I'm filming.
Oh my.
But once I capture that will be on our website, and people can watch that endlessly on a loop and be amused and be happy. So
I love that. We'll enjoy that. That sounds wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for being on the program. Cheers.